Hey everyone, it's David. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what a life path reading is and how it can help you on your life's journey. For those who don't know me, I've been doing astrology, numerology, and tarot card readings and reports for people for over a dozen years now. I've done over 1,000 astrology charts and reports for people, hundreds of tarot card readings, and a common theme that I saw from people is beyond just the urgent needs that they have for whatever challenge or struggle with their relationships they're going through, is that most people just don't feel connected with their life path and what they're meant to do in this life, and that makes them feel disoriented or disconnected from what they're really meant to do and struggle for meaning or purpose or fulfillment in this lifetime. So I asked 5,000 people on my email list. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how connected to you do you feel on your life path? The average response that I got from people was 3.9, just under 4 out of 10 for how connected do you feel to your life path. Now, when I think about this to me seems to be a huge spiritual crisis and where I really want to help people in this area, because if you had even a 4 out of 10 in your finances, I think that's something you would take an action on this month. If you said you had a 4 out of 10 in your relationships, that's something you would take action on soon, or within the next year or so. If you had a 4 out of 10 on your health, that's something you would actually make changes on today or this week. But I think a lot of people, when they feel disconnected to their life path, they could go years, even decades, without taking any action on how to improve it. And by the time you get to the end of your life and looking back, you really literally run out of time. So I'm on a mission to help people get better connected with their life path through the use of tarot, numerology, and astrology. And I like to do it through concept of the three selves. And there are many different iterations on this you can find online. But it's this idea that all of us really are three separate selves at the same time. We have this true, or this true self, who your authentic self, as I like to call it, who you actually are, your spirit, your soul, because I believe your spirit chose to come into this lifetime for a purpose, for some experiences to have in this lifetime. But then you also have kind of this ideal self of who you think you should be. And we'll get in a minute how that's actually also influenced by other people. But you have this ideal self of who you think you should become and who you think you should be. But then there's this ought self, this peer pressure of who you ought to be, how other people see you, how other people think you should be. And that causes lots of stress for people, because this is why a lot of people go through life feeling like they wear masks, whether for their coworkers or certain family members or to their friends or to different groups of people. Theories on this is if these three people are very connected and very close together, then your life is going to be very harmonious, right? If you can't tell the difference between your true self, your ideal self, and your ought self, then you are living harmoniously, kind of like the Ten of Cups and the tarot, and you are basically the same person, and you are showing the same face to everyone at every time, and you're living a very true and authentic purpose in your life, and you're going to be very connected to where you should be going. However, if you feel like these three selves are highly disconnected, in fact, they're very separate individuals, this is where you get the feeling of being disconnected or feeling like you're wearing a mask, or you are, not truly your authentic self in different areas of your life, whether that's with various people's businesses, whatever the case may be, and you may end up with the feeling more like the Nine of Swords, where you're literally kind of staying up at night worrying about these things because you are so far disconnected from your true self, or the pressures that people may put on you of who you ought to be or who you should become, even if it doesn't resonate with you and your true spiritual self. That can cause lots of conflict for you in your life and make things very difficult for you. So I'm on a mission to use my skills in astrology, numerology, and tarot to help people find and connect with their authentic selves, because I believe your soul chose this energy to come into this life and to help you on your path. And so when you stack it up a different way, this is why I like to think about it, is if you look at, your true self, your authentic self, this is where we talk about needing to go within, inner wisdom, trying to find who you are at your true core. And that's why I think it's one of the hardest things to do, which we'll expand upon here shortly. But then when you think about your ought self, who other people you think you should be, that is going to be heavily influenced potentially by other people telling you who you should become, who you ought to be, you ought to want to value these things, you want to do these things. This is where lots of people I work with have lots of called peer pressure from expectations from either parents, friends, society, cultures, religions, wherever they grew up, just geographically where they grew up. There are all these subconscious pressures and expectations put on us that we just really don't fully understand or unpack until we're older. Then we also have this kind of ideal self, which could potentially be in the middle, where you think, hey, once I truly know my true authentic self, I can figure out who my ideal self should be. But you're almost kind of fooling yourself if you don't believe your ideal self is also heavily influenced by the external environment. You're being fed messages from magazines, society, celebrities, wherever the case may be, telling you who you should want to become. Whether that is, you should want to get married at a certain age, or you should always have to have kids, or college should always be the right path for everyone, or you should study specific things. There's all these kind of subtle and not so subtle pressures on us of who we think our ideal self should be, even if it doesn't resonate with our true and authentic self. And then we are actually choosing to create a lot of tension and conflict for ourselves by almost giving into the peer pressure of who we think we should become to satisfy others. And that is why, of all of these, I believe this is the hardest time, especially now, to really get connected with your true and your authentic self. Why I believe I like to use tarot, astrology, and numerology to help reveal to people their true and authentic self so they can help gain more confidence and feel more connected to that. This is something I really spend a lot of time thinking about. So I really believe it's 100 years ago, or percent of the people who were employed in agriculture used to be very high. Around a couple hundred years ago, it was over 75% of people were employed in agriculture, which means you're going to work very hard, but you're also very connected to the land and the cycles of the seasons and all this kind of stuff that we no longer have. If you work a corporate job, every season could be the same, and you don't have that cyclical kind of work, right? And that's just gone down and down and down. So when I really think about people a couple hundred years ago, they may have had harder lives in many different areas than we do in the comforts of modern society today. But in some areas, I personally believe it was a much better environment for them to connect with their true and authentic selves that we have lost. If you think about life on a farm, it is going to be lots of hard work and lots of labor. But even during the winter, if you're growing crops and say selling corn, there is no corn to harvest or grow. I'm sure you're fixing tractors, whatever the case may be. But I really believe back then, someone who spends a lot more time alone than we do today with their own thoughts. Or I always think about, if you were able to read a book during that time, how much better connected would you be to the book? Or even how much time you would spend really thinking about your thoughts and what you believe in, what you believe to be true, will be much more further defined, because you have all this time, have a lot more isolated alone time to reflect on ourselves and what we really value, especially when we're working hard through seasonal things like farming that we don't have today. So when you look at today, if you think about going glamping, we honestly today are paying people to remove those external influences from us, whether that's, glamping without Wi-Fi, or whatever the case may be, or getting away from the hustle and bustle of your daily life and stuff like that. Like, we are paying people to try to shield us from the external forces that we have invited into our lives that are causing us conflict, because they are drowning out the signals and noise from our true and authentic self with who we ought to be, or who we think our ideal self should be. When you think about it, especially with like kids these days, the average age kids get cell phones these days around 12 years old or something like that, right? So most kids will get a cell phone before the age of 14, and every year those numbers, the age gets earlier and earlier and earlier. So in reality today, kids are getting cell phones earlier and earlier, even before their brains have stopped growing. So really your brain keeps growing well into your 20s. So before your brain's even fully formed, you have given up control of growing your own brain and your own influence to external things, social media, right? So imagine farms years ago, by the time they're 18, they probably are fairly well connected with their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, their intentions, what they believe, what they don't believe. And then that once they get exposed to external things, they have a greater base of who their true authentic self is that they can, kind of use against the influences of their outside world. But nowadays, when you are just barely hitting teen years and you don't even know who you are, you don't know what you want or what you value, you're being bombarded by all these external forces that just drown out any semblance of your own personal voice, and that causes all of us lots of conflict in our lives. That's why I personally believe modern time is the worst time to try and discover your true and authentic self, because we've ceded so much control over to other people and external influences. I think about even myself, just in one generation, the amount of time I spent when we didn't have cell phones just being bored and inventing games, right? Modern life, there's no opportunity to really even be bored, because you can always pick up a phone and either play game or be bombarded with messages of what other people are doing. You should be eating at these restaurants, you should be doing these things, you should be doing these dances, whatever the case might be. You are just drowning out any semblance of voice from your true authentic self by the external environment. And that's why I think it is why this is truly a spiritual crisis for this generation, is because we have traded off the share of voice from our authentic self to be tiny, tiny, smaller and smaller and smaller, and drawn out by external forces. So this is why, one of the reasons why I have so much empathy for celebrities like Britney Spears or other celebrities who have struggled with their fame. I know anytime this topic comes up and you read any articles or stories or anything on it, you will naturally, if you look in the comments, so many haters or just angry people who would say, how could anyone be unhappy when they have so much money, fame, or sex appeal? That's always going to come up. Well, if I had any of that stuff, I would never be as unhappy as they are. What almost says like, what right do they have to be unhappy if you are famous in the media or have lots of money or in sex appeal? And to me, when anyone makes comments like that, that is the first sign that they are fully disconnected from their life purpose or haven't done a lot of spiritual work on themselves. Because if you have any awareness of yourself or anyone's path, you'll have a little more empathy for people who are struggling on their own paths, their own journeys. And we say, how can anyone be unhappy with money, fame, or sex appeal? And that's because that is the three number one influences that will distract you from your spiritual path, and those are represented in cards of tarot readings like the Devil, which says you have a spiritual path, a guide, a plan that you want to be on, but you are getting distracted by what things on the earthly plane that people value, money, fame, and sex appeal. None of those are going to help you better connect yourself with your spiritual path, your spiritual journey, and what you're meant to do in this lifetime. So you are just naturally distracting yourself by it. This gets super hard. I do readings and work with people all the time who struggle with this, just with the pressures of their families and their expectations for school and jobs and careers, whatever you might do. I have lots of friends who say they had 4 outcomes in life. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a failure, and you had to choose which of those 4 life paths you would do in the eyes of your parents. And people struggle for years and decades trying to overcome that pressure alone. And when you layer onto it the pressures that celebrities may have with hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of fans or agents or albums or tours or pressures to get in as many magazines cover as you can, I can easily see a situation where the stress and the tension between who these celebrities really believe they are or who they're really growing into is at complete conflict with this ought self of who everyone is telling them they should be. So there are many ways you can explore this journey. I do it through as mentioned, some of the occult practices like astrology, numerology, and tarot, which I believe gives us lots of insights to ourselves. And if you really believe that you aren't as influenced to external influences or sources as you'd expect, I'm here to tell you there are so many things that are subconscious that you haven't learned yet. And I say half of life is learning what you need to unlearn in order to figure out how to move forward. So one example would be is I'm going to go through the scientific definition of a cult. And so what it is if you look up the sky at night and you can see the North Star, maybe, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and so forth, and you see the moon out there, right? And then you look out the next night, and all of a sudden the moon has moved, and now it's covering the North Star, and you can no longer see it, right? So the definition of occult or occultation is the obscuration of light from an astronomical body, whether it's a star by another body, such as a planet, in this case the moon. Hence, the total solar eclipse is the occultation of the sun by the moon. So the scientific definition of occult is saying to hide something, right? So all these different things, these paths through astrology, numerology, and tarot is the study of the occult, which means it is the study of what is hidden, so that how we can get back to our hidden influences or hidden pressures upon ourselves to reveal them in order to learn something about them. So I would challenge you, if you had a different emotional reaction when I said the word occult, or if you had a different definition in your head than the one I just gave you, then I think it's worth asking yourself, how did that definition get there? Who put it there? And do you still want it there? As an example of the potential, we know of the really the conscious and the overt pressure that people will put on us, whether that's teachers, society, parents, whatever the case might be. But there's just so much subconscious pressure as well, and that kind of seeps in to our subconscious that can create our own tensions for us, just by associations of what is good or bad, or right or wrong, or evil or not evil, whatever the case may be. I'll give you an example from my own personal journey of things I had to deal with. Is I really believe in my story, around the age of 30, I started to go deep in all this, that I was meant to do some tarot card reading. Tarot was in my astrology and numerology, DNA. If you look at my numerology, the letters of my name add up to 78, which is the cards of the tarot, and it is the consonants in my name go to 56, which is the minor arcana, and the vowels in my name go to 22, which is the major arcana, which adds up to 78, all the cards of the tarot. So it is in the quote unquote the DNA of my numerology. However, to date myself again, when I first started learning tarot, instead of buying a deck of cards and learning and so forth, just purchased and downloaded an app on my iPad at the time and just started flipping over cards and leading it. So this is something I'd been super interested in, trying to learn about, and then I actually downloaded an app and started trying to learn. And of course, within the first minute, the first three cards I turn over are super scary cards if you're not familiar with the tarot: the Death, the Devil, and the Tower. And so I actually, after being interested in the space, saw these cards, got scared, and shut it down, and even just deleted the app off of my iPad. And then I had to sit with myself for a while and say, why did I, like, if I feel a calling to do this and learn about this, why did I just give up within like 1 minute because I got scared, or I had some kind of impression of these things that it was evil and stuff like that, which I get lots of comments on social media about it, and say, I don't know anything about this. That's why I'm learning about it. So why do I already have a predetermined notions or emotional attachment to it that I didn't put on it because I haven't learned anything about it? I don't know enough to be, have a rational conversation about it, but I have some emotional attachment to it that is not my own. So I had to start to uncover my own biases that were put into me. Where these come from? Do I want them there? It's pre-programmed into me. It's just like it's pre-programmed into all of us. So that's why I always say there are some things we need to unlearn that don't serve our true self, even if it comes from your parents, and especially if it comes from your parents, because everyone does the best that they can, but they're putting their own biases onto us, whether or not it serves our true and authentic paths. So that's why when we get back to this idea of the three selves, with you at the center, you can easily come up with a scenario from what I've said of blaming the external forces, saying, oh yes, we're drowning out our true selves with all this external forces, social media, all those kinds of influences. If we just quiet all those influences, the world would be magical. But that's not necessarily true, as I've done lots of these readings for people, and I do chart reports and tarot readings for people. One of the things that I've learned is we are at the center of our own world, and that's why we are the greatest source of our own limitations, and it's hard enough for us to get beyond our own, barriers or restrictions on our own lives, self-limiting beliefs, to even self-actualize, that it's a shame that we'd even put other layers of external negative pressure on ourselves as well, because it's just so hard to, once we even reveal the true self to ourselves, your true and authentic self, and we uncover it and we give that maximum share of voice, it's going to be very complicated for us, because there's still a lot of conflict in there that we need to resolve within ourselves, let alone dealing with the external environment. And that is why I believe, on life path readings, it is super critical and important for us to get connected with our true and authentic selves and start to do that deep work. And I believe I can do it through a tarot, astrology, and numerology with other people. So hopefully, when you choose to work with me, when you ask the question, how connected do you feel on your life path, instead of the average answer of like less than a 4 out of 10, you'll get much higher scores with it. And it is probably, when I think about it, I think it's the most important thing you could possibly do in your life, because we always say everything else can be put off. You can work on your health, you can always make more money down the road, but at the end of our lives you can't invent more time to do things. So if we don't confront it right now and really figure out why we're here and what we are meant to do with the time that we have, if we don't confront that, then you are just going to waste the time that you have here. And that's why so many people at so many different ages say they feel like only a 4 out of 10. And that's why it is my mission to use the skills that I have in astrology, numerology, and tarot to help people feel more connected with their life paths so that those scores go up significantly higher. So if you're interested in working with me, either click on the links below or wherever else they may be around this video to get in touch with me and see how we can work together to help get you better connected with your life path.